What paranormal events have happened to you that you can't prove? No one will believe you. A few months back, I decided to meditate with a candle lit. Anyway, I woke up around 3:45 and I had what looked like either a woolen trouser leg or a coat sleeve hanging in my face. I was a little groggy, so was quite confused since the cupboard is at the end of my bed, so no clothes could be hanging out. As I woke up more, I realized that the object was indeed the end of a sleeve, and it was attached to a blue-gray hooded cloak covering an invisible person or person-shaped entity that was emerging from the edge of the ceiling above the foot of my bed. It had its invisible hand right in front of my face, and being fairly used to paranormal experiences, I just said, "Do you mind?" indignantly, and grabbed its wrist, or where I presumed its wrist was, to get its hand out of my face. I immediately felt its skin, kind of felt like dry frog skin, maybe comparable to a gecko, and got an electric jolt as I pushed its hand away. It vanished, and my hand went flying into the wall since my muscles were still pushing. It didn't scare me, but it still makes me very uncomfortable to think how often it has done this while I've been asleep. I was a bored suburban teenager with nothing better to do, so me and some close friends took up using Ouija boards. It was a small, boring, safe little town, so our kicks would come from seeing what thing we could talk to late at night. I regret it now, as I felt there were some things I shouldn't have seen. The time that always gets me creeped out is when I witnessed a 300-pound punching bag swing back and forth on its own. Chain rattling and everything. Nothing could have moved that bag. Nothing was simply strong enough. Skeptics try and tell me otherwise, but no way it was a prank, because even fishing line can't budge that heavy bag. 3 people were in that house, me being one of them, and we were all standing right there with our fleabing jaws on the floor. I've seen pieces move. I've heard voices of people mimicked. I've seen some pretty gnarly shadows, and I've had some terrifying nightmares, but the thing that separates this moment from those other moments was that there was no way to use skepticism to deduce it. I could write off those other moments and chalk it up to anything, but not this time around. Not when you witness the laws of physics being defied. When my sister and I were kids, we used to share a room and we had bunk beds. She had top bunk because she's older and I had the bottom one. My sister talks in her sleep and she used to sleepwalk around this time too, but grew out of it. One night, I woke up to her talking in her sleep. She was talking about how excited she was because our mum brought her the Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince book, and she was excited to find out about what was going to happen next. Then I heard a man with a really croaky, deep and aggressive voice say, "Do you think this is a fleabing joke?" And I looked up to where my sister was and didn't see anything, but then I looked at our drawers from across the room, and one of the drawers was half open, and I saw a big pair of reddish-yellow eyes in the open drawer just staring at me with pure hatred. I was so scared. I pretty much just cried myself to sleep. I ended up being scared to sleep in my bed for a while as well. I also told my parents and sister about it a couple of years later, and she was scared and believed me, but my parents didn't. I've got 3. 1. My grandpa died when I was about 6. I didn't know him very well and only knew really what he looked like from pictures because we lived on other sides of the country. I had met him memorably maybe twice. The night he died, I woke up on the other side of the country to him standing at the foot of my bed. He told me to tell your mother everything will be okay. I went to my mom's room and told her Grandpa was in my room and said to say everything will be all right. My mom brushed it off as a 6-year-old being weird in the middle of the night. The next morning, my aunt called to tell my mom Grandpa passed away in his sleep. Once my mom got the news, she asked me to describe him. I described him dressed and looking, according to my mom, exactly how he looked when she was a little girl. 2. I rented the upstairs of my dad's duplex from him. He lived downstairs. I worked in a sales job. Where if I hit my numbers, I was off the weekend, if I didn't, I had to work Saturdays. Every Saturday, being a caring dad, he would rap on my door and ask if I had to go to work because he didn't want me to oversleep. After he passed, I was the only one living in the house until estate stuff got figured out. About 3 weeks after he passed, I was awake, just stretching out, laying in bed. There was a very distinguishable rap on my door, exactly how my dad would knock. It actually freaked me out because there wasn't supposed to be anyone in the house besides me. I got up and answered the door and nobody was there. I went to lay back in bed and could hear footsteps downstairs. It was an old house. I got up to see if my brother had maybe come over, but nobody was there. All main outside doors were locked, no sign of anybody. 3. I worked at an old neighborhood dive bar that has been around for 100 or so years. Every now and again, I could hear someone opening and closing the cooler door in the basement after closing time. I told the owner this after it kept happening and he said, "Yeah, that's just Jerry. He thinks he's still stocking the beer, he's harmless." Jerry was the original owner of the bar that died in the 60s. I was on my family computer really late at night, back when our house had a computer room. It was probably close to 2 in the morning. I was up writing a story. The computer faced a wall, and on the other side of that wall was the kitchen. My mom is a clean freak, so the kitchen is always zeroed out every night, no dishes on the counter, etc. This is important to the story. I heard a really loud sound, as if tens of things had fallen off the counter. I thought someone had gone into the kitchen for something, and I just hadn't heard them, and they'd knocked something over, or whatever. I got up, went into the kitchen and turned on the light, but nothing and no one was in there. There was nothing on the floor, etc. So I just walked back to the computer feeling very much on edge. A few moments after I sat back down, there was an insanely loud bang on the wall right in front of me, where the computer was. It sounded like someone had hit the wall, right where I was sitting. I jumped up and ran downstairs to my bedroom. I have no explanation for either of those sounds. One more short thing. I had a dream about my apartment before I'd ever lived in it. In the dream, my bed was exactly where I'd put it, and everything was arranged the same way I'd ended up arranging it. In the dream, the door slowly opened. I didn't remember the dream until after I'd moved in, was laying in bed one night, and everything looked exactly the same as that dream. When we were moving out, we noticed a child's drawing of a person with their eyes scratched out in a hidden cupboard. So I have a couple, one is paranormal, and the other I'm not sure if you would classify it as paranormal or a glitch in the matrix. Here goes. The first story happened about a couple years ago or so. I was sitting in my room just chilling out. I heard a female voice say, "Let's play a game," so I assumed it was my mom wanting to play a board game or something. I get up and walk to the living room and ask if she called for me or said anything, to which she replied she had not. It was really strange because the voice was so clear and I don't have any siblings either, and no other female besides her and I were in the house. Now the second story, I apologize if this is the wrong place, but I have no explanation, and no one seems to believe me at all. Last spring, my boyfriend and I were taking a history class together. The professor hands out these study guide type things that we have to fill out during lecture. Anyways, I was waiting on my boyfriend to finish chapters 6, 7, 8, I believe, and this is where things get weird. So I remember him giving me these papers and I remember holding them in my hand and studying them. I remember looking over specific vocabulary words and everything. So, the next day I'm looking for these notes and frantically looking through my backpack because the exam was coming up soon and I can't find them anywhere. I sent my boyfriend a text asking if he could print me off another copy, and he swears he never even finished them and that he was just starting to type them up, finish them. I didn't believe him at first, but he usually doesn't joke around when it comes to study materials. I still have not found them to this day. I saw a monster. Like a Where the Wild Things Are. What small children imagine when you talk about a monster-style monster. I grew up in a 150-year-old farmhouse in the middle of nowhere. I saw things. Disembodied shadows and glowing red eyes at the top of the stairs. My mom said I talked about a man in a red plaid shirt, but I don't have strong memories of that. I do remember the monster very clearly. I had to have been preschool aged, probably 4. I was playing in the kitchen while my mom was doing dishes when I looked up and saw a monster standing in the doorway. It had yellow horns that almost touched the doorframe, long orange fur, and yellow teeth and claws. I said, "Mommy, look, a monster." And it turned and ran down the hall either toward the front door or my dad's office. I didn't watch where it went, I was too busy running in the opposite direction. I also had a dream, or maybe it wasn't a dream, where the same thing happened, the same monster standing in the same doorway. The only difference being, I was sitting at the kitchen table instead of playing. That time, I tried to scream, but I couldn't, so I just hid under the table until it went away. I would have written it all off as dreams, but my mom still remembers the first incident. She remembers feeling very creeped out all of a sudden, then hearing me say, "Mommy, look, a monster." She almost looked, but she was too scared, so she just told me there was no such thing and continued doing dishes as I hid behind her, hoping that if she didn't acknowledge it, it would go away. I was staying in an old schoolhouse while on a volunteer trip in Cambodia. Every night, it sounded like someone was going through our bags, and it does look like it in the morning, even though we locked all the doors and windows. My teammates thought it was probably a skillful local thief, but nothing was ever stolen. On the final night, someone tried to wake me up from my sleep by talking real near my face and prodding me through my sleeping bag. When I finally gave up the pretense of sleeping, because I was real scared of waking up to seeing something or nothing, it was because my sleeping bag was sliding to the other side of the classroom we were sleeping in. Imagine watching the sleeping bag I was in being dragged slowly over rough concrete floor by nothing visible. Yeah, I screamed till everyone woke up and they tried convincing me I must have sleepwalked. This isn't much, but I'm pretty sure the bedroom I slept in a couple years ago was haunted. On several occasions, I had nightmares where I was watching YouTube in bed, and all of a sudden, the video would glitch out, and I could hear loud static. Sometimes there was the vague outline of a man's face. I didn't really think much of it until the same face popped up in a video while I was wide awake, but just for a single frame. I tried rewinding the video, but I didn't see it again. Some time later, I remember browsing the internet when for absolutely no reason at all, I was struck with a really intense feeling like someone was in the room with me. It got so intense that I nearly vomited with fear. I googled something like how to get rid of a poltergeist and found some articles mentioning burning sage, so I ran to the kitchen and found some spice mix. The label said there was sage in it, then I ran back, put a little bit in a jar, and tried to light it. It took a while to burn, but when it did, I felt instantly better. I thought that was the end, but a few weeks later, I saw, in my periphery, a vague figure at the end of my bed. From what I could make out, it was short and had a large head with small eyes. I picked up a pocket knife and searched the whole room, but I couldn't find anything. Suffice it to say, I did not sleep that night. About a month later, I moved out. Nothing like that has happened since then.